If you keep relying on the things that you've already done and you already know, then the painting kind of stays static. And people are always asking me, oh, the paintings are so different. Well, everything outside in the world that I'm looking at is in a constant state of flux. So how you can come up with something and just stick with it for the next 40 years is beyond my comprehension. And I just absolutely don't understand how that's possible. You know, nothing out the window is the same 1 millisecond to the next. And I think we owe it to ourselves somehow to try and, trying to get some of that complexity into what you're asking people to look at. I would say that the paintings contain something of the world in them. They feel old, not new. Yeah, I'm an image maker. I spend my life testing the limits of my relationship to color and form. I use the color to find the form. I was always just making things, so it became kind of, just a way of life. And the most kind of natural state was to be doing something creative. I did go and study, technically. I think in high school you're trying out lots of different things, but the only thing that really kind of captivated me was English and art. So I was quite serious about painting in high school. And I remember actually just feeling so relieved that there was something I could do that didn't involve having to talk to anybody. Because I kind of felt a little bit out of place, I guess. And painting was always a way to sort of process the world. And it was such a relief to have something, that you didn't have to justify to anyone. It was this kind of extraordinary space that you could just slip into. I don't like new conversations or new friends. I like old conversations, and you have to wait a long time before there's something on the surface to remove. No painter wants to be dealing with something that feels and looks like paint. So I'm trying to get the paint to transform into something else. And the paintings only get this kind of unique individual personality by giving it a lot of different experiences. And that is not something that you can rush. If you try and rush the surface, you end up with something very superficial. And I really reject the idea of formulaic painting, which is why the paintings have completely different compositions, energies, textures, colors. No two paintings of mine are ever similar. They're always radically different because they're different people, or at least that's how I think of them. I think that the way that I paint it has vestiges of my life as a printmaker because I came from an interdisciplinary program, but one of the things that I found absolutely mind-bending was intaglio printmaking. And I fell in love with the alchemy of this process, its complexity, its absolutely insane slowness, because with intaglio you have to wait so long for what you see to actually materialize. Once you've made the marks, then you've got to burn them onto the copper plate, then you've got to submerge them in the acid bath, wait for that process to happen, time it depending on how thick or how weak or strong the acid is. There are so many variables before you even get to the part where you can see what you've done, because then you have to ink the plate, then you have to put it through the press, and then that moment of reveal of peeling back the felt and that smell, and then lifting this thing up, only to realize that you've kind of only gone an inch forward to what you had in mind. And printmaking for me was this incredible. It slowed me down, and I think that was really good at the time, because I am by nature someone that is very impatient, and I've had to learn through my process to really kind of do a 180 the way I paint is actually really painstakingly slow. And I think I would never have come around to that as the process of adding and subtracting and removing and moving things around and getting this kind of feeling of time in the painting if I hadn't had that frustrating, cumbersome education as a printmaker. But now I really feel that I paint in a way that's basically printmaking. I'm still trying to figure out how to paint, for sure. I don't think I'll ever figure out fully how to paint. And there is a kind of mystery to the process that I don't think is something you want to resolve. Nor do I think I have the capacity to resolve it. There's something that also happens on the surface that is intangible, that is absolutely outside of something that I could say, I can't draw a straight line to it. And I think that is part of why I find it infinitely fascinating, because you're always just trying to inch towards this moving target. And as soon as you get close to it, the thing sort of just slips a little bit further into the heights. You're always just a little bit further. And then, oh my God, okay, no, I'm not there yet, okay. It's really kind of mind-bending. I have an antagonistic relationship to color. I would say that I wield color more than I use color. I use color to chase out, I use one color to chase out another color in my paintings. This is the way that they kind of spar with each other. So also the color I find very unsatisfying if it comes out too sort of slick and fast and out the tube. So I'm mixing things and moving them about in a way that almost kind of trying to subvert their natural way, things that just shouldn't go together or work together, that just are not complementary, that are absolutely not friends. And that's one part of the color journey that happens on a painting. But my paintings go through so many evolutions that it's so difficult to really pinpoint. Yellow and blue have entirely different, how do you say it? They have different, my body does different things with yellow and blue. Yellow is a color for me that has always gotten me sort of toe tapping. It's a very excitable color. It's a very, I feel quite passionate when I'm painting with yellow. I feel strong and bold, and blue is a kind of much more introspective color. Very, very slow, very melancholic, very, something like processing in the back of your thoughts. So one is kind of inside and the other one is outside. I don't try and inflict upon the painting my own desire for the colors, if that makes any sense. It sounds like kind of malarkey, but that the painting also kind of tells you whether or not it can handle whatever it is that you're about to do next to it. And sometimes the colors land entirely in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then you have to be really patient to move them around and to wait for them to dry before you keep adding. Otherwise, you just make a mess on the surface. And this has taken years of understanding actually what it is I do. Because you also have to understand or recognize the value of the thing you weren't expecting. I think that's the part that's really fascinating. But you do test the limits of colors as well. And you have favorite colors, and those go in and out of favor. Some colors I find very immediate, and other colors, much more mysterious, evocative. I mean, you can't paint everything red and call it fire either. It doesn't work like that. So that color nuance that you get in my work is because it's built up with so many different layers. And those layers also need to percolate in between each session. So the painting becomes really interesting for me when I have back layer. And that's due to the sanding process where I'm taking things away, and this raw area that you can see in the canvas, if you look very closely, is where the painting has been sanded back, and then it's coming through in small, it's more like excavation, really. You can see it in all these paintings. This painting was it was a completely different painting 15 or 20 paintings ago. So there are always innumerable layers and paintings under the paintings, under the paintings, under the paintings, until finally you have something that's like the belly of the painting is pushing out. So you can see that on the front, and then the thing that's kind of happening behind is what has been revealed through the sanding and the scraping and the slowly whittling it down. It's ironic because I spend my life talking to the paintings, but they are silent, but yet they do a lot of talking. You're kind of creating something that's got to do a lot of work actually to reach the viewer, and ever more because people have such fractured attention spans. So the painting has its work cut out for it, and I don't know what exactly the process looks like. I talk to the paintings. I don't know if that's what happens to, prod them along, but you wipe them, you scrape them, you betray them, you also inflict things on them. You have to have something to do, That's every day is, well, what are you gonna do on this particular canvas? My main collaborator is the city and all the things that it contains. And I think you feel that in the painting, something that feels a bit like architecture mixed in with urban, mixed in with chaos, bodies, the impossibility of architecture across a landscape that has also changed and evolved and been burnt down. And London's such a crazy city to make work in. I take all of the things that I see and I experience, transfer through me and onto the canvas. So I don't sketch out the paintings, or I don't start out with any plan, but I slowly build them up. I never think of them as resolutely abstract. I find that such a limiting vocabulary for what I think is everything. There's everything in the painting for me. There's skin texture, there are smile lines, there's grimaces, there's wombs, there's flesh, there's sly kind of exchanges between people, there's eye glances, there's arms. Everything's also related to the body in the way that the painting is made. So it contains a body in it because you can see the way my body moves through the painting. But I also think that I need a whole nother lifetime to make a different body of work. I started off when I was initially painting all those years ago, I was painting very figuratively. with great effort trying to paint in a kind of hyper-realistic style. And then after a while, I tried to paint in a way that was very naive and incredibly sort of rejecting all of that classical training. So I made sort of cartoon, which, unfortunately, if you Google, you'll still come up with. You see all these different lives of your painting journey before you as an artist as more and more time goes on. And it is quite disorienting to look back and see all these different ways, because how do you arrive at a style? And have I arrived at a style? I think it's really slippery territory to sort of pigeonhole that. So I think the painting will continue to evolve. It's in a kind of flux. And for me to find a way of painting that felt my own, it's been 10 years of just relentless failure, basically, to now come to something that I think is sort of starting to be okay. A lot of my work at this scale has to do with movement. So I work on these large-scale paintings with a forklift, and I use the cherry picker as a kind of a way to move through the space and extend beyond the reach of my arms. So you'll see they're kind of in sections somehow, or at least the way that I think about it is that every sort of part that you take off has to be kind of a painting in its own kind of right, so that if you took every square, it would make sense if you extrapolated it from the entirety of the painting. So I usually make the paintings from left to right with this kind of horizontal pull, and then I go up and down, and then I go in and in and in and in. And by that I mean I really excavate the painting, and this is through the sanding process of taking out the layers. If one painting gets really jammed up and really stuck, you can keep throwing everything you have at that one poor painting. Eventually that painting is just going to collapse. So in order to kind of unburden yourself, if something becomes too complicated, it's just too many things happening, then you move on to another painting. And similarly, when there's nothing happening in the painting yet, if you try to accelerate it too fast, you end up with the same problem in reverse. So it's really about keeping the life cycle of the paintings at different points. That's why I never clear the studio out entirely. So this is what we're looking at behind us in this room, are all the paintings that are in various points of completion. Each individual painting has to be resolved and strong on its own, because I'm really against this idea that you go into a painting show and you scan the room and there's like 2 or 3 kind of key paintings and the rest are just totally forgettable. Or they're so formulaic that you also don't really have to look at them. So I'm really interested in like the 12th reading of a particular painting, the 15th reading, that if the painting does its job, you want to kind of come back to investigate each little section and have a think about it. It doesn't have to be some life-changing cataclysmic event, but just that you feel you want to look at it. It's so basic, really, to say that, but it seems to have gone out of everyone's consciousness, that the painting should also just hold your attention, and that you should have to work to decipher it somehow. I like things that you have to work for. It's like, why would you want your poetry spoon-fed to you? And I'm not saying that my work is like trailblazing some kind of new territory that no one's ever been to. Of course, you see painting in painting. I think that's one of the ways that it's so powerful, because history is transposed inside of the work if it's good. And so often you don't get there. And that is the failure that you have to kind of deal with. And I think when I was younger, I used to really find that difficult with myself, because it's not like you can't just show up and work really hard. Sometimes the harder you work, the worse it is. So what is it that actually sets it apart? It's very complicated to know if you have arrived there. But when I recognize that in other artists' work, and I do recognize it, it sends like an electrical volt through me, and you think, well, how is that even possible? You get goosebumps. How have you even dared to do that? And there you have it, and then you think, okay, well, worth a shot. I mean, I believe in art more than anything else. The way that it has like saved me on so many occasions, I think, is just so profound. And the range of work that does it for me is just so vastly different. And then you feel it. And the beautiful thing is that other people feel so many different things, that we're not all feeling the same thing. And we're all kind of completely, I think, humbled. And the world is such a complicated place to be in. I think art gives you this kind of weapon for attempting to understand some of that profundity.